Did Alexandra and Ariel make it?
I said I-5's the parking lot.
No, I know, but like just recently in the last few
Yeah,
seconds?
I just checked.
Oh,
They're still stuck. I'm wondering if they can join Zoom on a phone.
they can. Suggest it. They could at least listen to the audio. I forgot to brush my teeth this morning.
Sweaters.
They were really gritty.
Sweaters.
We're waiting to see.
I don't know. I just recommended it. They're not online on Slack, so I don't know if they...
Then you don't have to look at it.
Yeah,
Okay.
Can you text them?
I added them.
All right, well, today we are, is the recording on?
Yes.
Okay. Today we are welcoming some of our non-full moon circle people because I haven't given this teaching, especially on the 15 verses of Abhinavagupta, since India, the last trip to India. And I wanted to open this up so that people who haven't had the teaching or who want to have it again could join it. What we've been doing the past few meetings is taking a tour of some of the very basic foundational cosmological observations that are grounding our practice and the tradition of Trika Shaivism. So we had a brief afternoon talking about the 36 tattvas, if you remember, way back when. And then last time we met, we talked about the upayas, the different skillful means that are expressed by the different kinds of practices that we do. And I know some of you got together and studied those things. Today I want to talk about Pratyabhijna, which is one of the foundational observations about how the universe functions related to our tradition, but it's also one of the schools of Tantra that fed into the synthetic tradition that we're in. So when I say that we're in a synthetic tradition, I mean that there isn't one clearly demarcated tradition that we call Trika. In fact, Trika was one of the lineages of practice or the streams of Vidya Shakti, of wisdom energy, that was active in Kashmir at the same time as Abhinavagupta was alive. And there were other streams like the Kaula tradition and the Krama tradition, and Pratyabhijna is one of those streams. Now, like today we call the whole tradition Trika Shaivism, even though it was just a stream at one point. Back then, there were periods of time when it was called Pratyabhijna. So this is a very, very important aspect of the view of the tradition, but also of the cosmology the cosmology that we experience when we do the practice. I'm very careful not to say that this is a philosophy or a concept of reality. You'll notice I'm really careful not to say those things, because when we talk about something like Pratyabhijna or the 36 tattvas or the upayas, we're talking about something that grew out of practice, grew out of sadhana, that grew out of a direct encounter with reality, with direct knowing, with pratyaksha darshina, direct realization. So these are not concepts, although sometimes I might sloppily refer to them that way. They're more like reports from the front line of practice, of sadhana. So the founder of the Pratyabhijna school, and I'm going to say what this means in a minute, was Somananda, and he was a student of Vasgupta, the Tirtan, or the treasure revealer, or the Shruti, who had revealed to him the Shiva Sutras. The word Pratyabhijna is usually translated into English as self-recognition. And we've sent the picture of the whiteboard with Pratyabhijna spelled out in transliterated Sanskrit and Sanskrit for those of you that are online. So the translation of the whole word is self-recognition in English in general. If we pull it apart a little bit, the first part of that word comes from prati, P-R-A-T-I, and that means something like something that was originally known, or original knowledge. But is now forgotten. And then the rest of the word, it's hard to say it not with the whole word, but Pratyabhijna means something like to know immediately, to know something immediately. So if we were going to come up with a sentence of what this word means, it means to know immediately something that one knew before but had forgotten. We all can relate to that. Some of you might be freaking out right now, thinking, oh my God, this is too hard. My brain doesn't want to do this. I hate when Shambhavi goes into these things. But think about what I just said. To have an instant understanding, or an immediate understanding, or a direct understanding of something one knew before but had forgotten. We all have that experience. When we hear something about our lives or our condition that really hits the mark, we have this feeling of Pratyabhijna. We have the feeling of rediscovering something we once knew that's very essential to who we are. This is an incredibly common experience. And you don't have to be a practitioner of Trika Shaivism to have this experience. Someone tells you, shares an insight about you and how you are in relationships, or just how you are, and you have the immediate feeling, oh right, I knew that. And you have the immediate experience, yes, this is true. And I knew it, but I'd forgotten it. We have this experience if we come to a teaching, a spiritual teaching, in a tradition and with a teacher who's right for us. Even if we just wandered in for some, we thought we were going to contra dance, but we made a mistake and we went in the wrong room and we ended up in this weird teaching. But we decided to stay anyway. Even with no prior experience or even intention, we can wander into a teaching or intentionally go to a teaching and have an experience of Pratyabhijna. We can sit down and say, I don't know what's going on here, but I recognize something and I feel that feeling of coming home. Right? I feel a feeling of home is another way of saying Pratyabhijna. Right? So these are big words, but they mean something that is part of our everyday experience, which is the hallmark of this tradition. Everything in it, no matter how long the word gets, everything in it is something about our immediate tangible experience. So this is why I say these things are not concepts. They're words that are trying to capture an experience that yogis have had, and that of course we all have, because as above, so below. As in ignorance, so in wisdom. You could also say that. Those who are ignorant have the same experience as those who are wise, except that the ignorant versions of those experiences are much more limited. We can even have the experience of hearing teachings and feeling, I don't know why that is true, but I know it's true. That's an experience of Pratyabhijna. We can have the experience of coming to teachings and we hear something random and we just start weeping because it feels so true, because we recognize it, that it is saying something about our existence. It's identifying something fundamental to our existence, and just hearing it can be incredibly moving, because we have forgotten. When we have forgotten, we feel lost, we feel homeless, we feel ungrounded, we feel disconnected, we feel separate, we feel lonely. And when we come home to our real nature, it's very moving. It's not just like, yeah, back to my real nature, ho hum. Another day, another realization. No, we feel moved by rediscovering ourselves and rediscovering our goodness and our sweetness, rediscovering our real intelligence, rediscovering everything's okay, all our worries were for naught. So the Pratyabhijna school was founded by Somananda, student of Vasgupta, and he wrote probably the first text that was officially under the Pratyabhijna banner, called the Shiva Drishti. It's not translated into English as far as I know, but there is an academic book that talks about it at great length. If anybody's interested, I can shoot you that title. And then his son, the son of Somananda, was someone you know about, Utpaladeva.
Oh.
That sweetheart whose poems and we just love.
Shambhavi,
Yeah.
when was this?
Somananda lived at the, like, around the late 9th century to the early 10th century.
AD.
AD, yeah, AD.
BCE or
AD.
AD.
So the text of Trika, like what we associate it with Trika, but really of all these different streams, the earliest text we have is about the 5th century AD. And then the tradition kind of went into decline, at least textually, by the 12th century. Abhinavagupta lived on the cusp of the 10th and the 11th century. Right? So Somananda's 100 years before that.
Shambhavi.
Yes.
Hi, Zariel, from
Hi.
my car.
You
on
made it.
I-5.
Oh no, you're still in your car.
Yeah, it's a complete standstill. I've been here for like 45 minutes now.
Wow.
Yeah, ridiculous. Something really bad must have happened, which is unfortunate. But did Somananda live in Kashmir, or was he in
Yes.
a different part of India?
Yes, these are all Kashmiris.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. So then, Utpaladeva wrote a text that is translated into English, if you feel like reading it, the Ishwara Pratyabhijna Karika. I think it's actually in the Jayapura library.
It is.
Yeah. So the Ishwara Pratyabhijna Karika.
What is Karika?
I don't know what that means, but it's often, yeah, I have to look that up. And then Abhinavagupta wrote a couple of commentaries on Utpaladeva's text. And his student, Kshemaraja, also wrote a text about Pratyabhijna. Kshemaraja, to my view, wasn't as thoroughgoing in his view as Abhinavagupta. He's sort of an example of you get someone like Abhinavagupta, who's a real siddha and a brilliant person, who is completely fearless about going the distance and beyond, crossing any line in order to discover how things actually are, with seemingly no dogmatism whatsoever and unafraid to question anything. I mean, that's a very rare situation. And then you get a student who's a very brilliant student, but who isn't as brave, who's more cautious and a little more caught up in the morality of his class and caste. So his commentaries are great, but they're not as breathtaking as Abhinavagupta's, let's just put it that way. Very rare to have someone like Abhinavagupta and then, you know, have a student who can really carry the mantle of that person. Very, very rare.
Abhinavagupta is the one who says, I can't, was he the one who's like, I can't wait to tell you?
No, that's Swami Lakshmanju. So he's a
Okay, I'm
20th
just like,
century
how do we
teacher.
have pictures of something not
Yes,
getting?
aliens brought
Special tantra cameras.
prototype iPhones to the planet.
Cool, that answers that.
So, what is Pratyabhijna? We've already given you a sense of what it is through your own experience. Right? It's that sense of recognition of something very, very fundamental to your nature that is also moving and like a huge relief in some way to come back to. It also throws a different light on your normal way of being in the world. When you have the spirit experience of recognition, of self-recognition, then you can, at least briefly, experience the artifice or the contrivance of your normal ways of being in the world, the forgetful ways. And of course, we try to have this experience over and over again. And we try to be in a condition of self-recognition as much as possible. This is called resting in your own nature, or being in the state of your practice, recognizing what is really happening here, what you really are, what everything really is. Trying to be in a state of remembrance of that is self-realization, right? That's the whole thing. So what happens? There's the appearance, or what are called appearings, abhasya, of worlds and beings and objects. Those appearings are happening within the consciousness and energy of Lord Shiva, we would say. We could just say reality. That there's one continuous consciousness, that we live in a subjectivity. And that objectivity is an appearance within subjectivity. Objectivity, this appearance of an external objective world where there really are things like solid bodies, is an experience that is being generated by this infinite subjectivity we call reality. You can call it reality. You can call it Lord Shiva. It doesn't matter. But we have forgotten that, and the forgetting is built in. It's part of the game. So in a sense, Pratyabhijna, self-recognition, refers to the lila, the sport of this reality. In that it, through its own freedom of self-expression, that's what Swatantriya means, freedom of self-expression, it can create even experiences of ignorance or forgetting. I mean, forgetting is another way of saying ignorance, right? We just forget. We all have an experience of forgetting every single day. So that emotion that you experience, that inexpressible, deep, beautiful, moving emotion that you experience when you remember your real nature, is being experienced by this reality 24/7.
So it's the base.
It's the base. Mm-hmm.
Behind that, there's nothing. I mean, there's no
behind.
There's no behind it. Okay.
Right,
So
it
it's
is the
base.
behind.
Okay.
It sits behind everything
Mhm.
and also permeates everything.
Mhm.
And so it's together with the experience of forgetting, because if you have to have the experience
Right,
of forgetting,
but
you have the remembering.
Everywhere there is forgetting and remembering at the same time.
It's like Shiva and Shakti, they're
No?
together. I just mean
Yes,
together.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
One isn't Shiva and
Yeah.
one isn't Shakti then. Yes. So let's think more, contemplate more our own experience of that. When we're going about, I'm gonna now, for a while maybe, as long as I feel like it, stop saying we're in our ordinary lives. I'm gonna say boring. For those of you that read my little mini treatise on boringness on Facebook this week. Yeah, it's just another way of saying ordinary, right? That forgetful state, when we're being self-protective and we're not being in our real nature. So when we're being boring and then we're going about, we've forgotten who we really are, and all of the concerns that we have and the worries and the ambitions all seem extremely earnest and serious, and we're all overwrought about everything, and pumped up about this and that. And then something happens, we do some practice, or we go be with our teacher, or we go to a teaching, or we see something random that just triggers a remembering moment. What is that like? It's like everything just sweetens and spreads, and all of that concern, self-concern that we have goes away. What else do we experience in those moments? I mean, they're varied, right?
Feels like alignment to me sometimes.
Alignment.
Like
Mhm.
coming into, I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah, it's inexpressible, but we can dance around it with some words, right?
Connection.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like there's a lot that's swept away. And then,
Tenderness.
Mm-hmm.
Pleasure.
Yeah, tenderness, pleasure.
Amusement.
Yeah.
Spaciousness,
Yep.
I was gonna say groundedness.
Same thing.
what's the next one? She has broken it down.
Anybody think of any other words that might?
Familiarity.
Familiarity.
Feeling of meeting,
Mm-hmm.
What did you say?
a feeling of meeting,
Meeting.
and curiosity too is another thing.
And rightness. Not like moralistic rightness, but
Oh, I know.
yeah.
Heart connection,
Heart.
here's a poignancy,
Mm-hmm.
Relaxation.
So there's many, many more words we could throw out. But this state of self-recognition, seeing oneself in one's own life, in one's own creations, if we're talking from the perspective of all of reality, continually experiencing that re-recognition. That's the state of God, having that experience. Seeing itself through the limitation of duality, using the capacity to experience itself as two rather than just one, in order to experience the beauty of its own nature, the intelligence of its own nature, right? The poignancy of its own nature, the astonishment of its own nature, all these different things, anything you could say about it. So Pratyabhijna is being more in the condition that so-called God is in all the time. Pratyabhijna also has to do with what is near to us. So that real nature is closer to us than our own breath, as is said in the Tantras. It's very near to us, something that's very intimate to us. It's ready to be discovered. It's referred to in the South Indian Tantra tradition as an open secret. Something that seems to be hidden, but it's everywhere, in everything. So in everything, in everyone, in every circumstance, there is the possibility to recognize oneself, to remember oneself, to remember how things really are. There's no special circumstance that one has to be in order to recognize this. Of course, in our limitation, we have special circumstances called spiritual teachers and lineages and teachings. Those are special circumstances. But those are only helpmeets or some sort of technology that we can let go of at some point when we recognize that that possibility is everywhere and everything at every time. And we learn to connect with it in every circumstance, not just in special circumstances. So this is what Pratyabhijna means. It's both the game that Lord Shiva is playing, it's also built into everything. It is your capacity to self-recognize. And it points toward the state of the Lord.
I have a question. Does Shiva, God, reality, recognizes himself in every single aspect of
Yes.
reality?
Yes.
So it's not sort of just a privilege of human beings
No.
to
You could say that, if, we can talk in the relative and the absolute, right? In the absolute sense, everything is always recognized as being that. So that astonishment at one's own nature that's the definition of Ananda. That incredible astonishment and appreciation for one's own real nature. That's what that is. But when we're talking from a relative level, we could define sentience and insentience in terms of the capacity for Pratyabhijna. For instance, this cup has a very low capacity for self-recognition. That's the only thing that really separates it from us. It's also made out of consciousness and energy, but the limitations that have been imposed on this experience of this cup, because there is not a cup, there is just an experience of the cup. Or you could say it a better way, which is the cup is the experience of the cup, and we should stop referring to this gap because there's no gap. I was just realizing the other day how in a lot of Buddhist teachings, their definitions of reality are always tied to what they have discovered reality is not. Kind of a fine point, but anyway. So I might say this isn't actually a cup, it's an experience of a cup, but there is no actual cup in the way we think there is, so why even keep referring to it? You know, it is an experience of a cup positively, and it needs no other reference, right? And it is, in an absolute sense, it's fully aware consciousness and energy. But from a relative perspective, it is Lord Shiva purposefully expressing his own nature as this, and as something that is jada, unable to self-reflect, unable to recognize.
So the cup cannot self-realize, and we can.
Well, it's a good question. I can't say I absolutely know the answer to that question. I think there's, a continuum of capacity for self-recognition. And, yeah.
Is Shiva recognizing himself in his forgetting? And then on a relative level, is it possible to recognize our true nature in our forgetting of our true nature?
Like to be in a state of forgetfulness, but recognize? No.
But recognize that as
Well,
Shiva nature.
Sure. But that's more of a mental trick,
Yeah.
right? So I recognize that I'm not enlightened and therefore have forgotten a bunch of stuff. And I also recognize that that's an aspect of Shiva nature's artistry. But I still can't instantly remember all those things I've forgotten, right?
I think I'm trying to understand how Shiva actually can forget.
Mhm.
Is it-
There isn't any actual forgetting. There's a play of forgetting. It's exactly like if you played a part of someone who was very ignorant, you would be simply dramatizing ignorance. You would not be ignorant. So this is a dramatization of ignorance, not actual ignorance.
But if it was
And there
that way-
actually is no ignorance,
It's
right?
just a play.
It's just a play. Well, it is a play. It isn't just a play. It is a play.
But if it was that way, then the cup could potentially self-realize.
Well,
If it
Lord
was
Shiva
just a
as the
play.
cup could, yes, that's very true. That's extremely true.
What was it?
Lord Shiva, Alice said, so if that's true, that Lord Shiva is the player and is just dramatizing this cup, then that means this cup could self-realize. Yes, because Lord Shiva could make that happen.
Makes the
Because
possible
this
impossible.
is Lord Shiva. And Lord Shiva could make this cup self-realize.
And it
But it
would
just
still be a
doesn't-
cup.
Huh?
It would still be a cup.
I don't
having the
know.
experience of
As Ma said, God can make the impossible possible and the possible impossible. That's what Swatantriya means. Swatantriya means infinite potential to express oneself. Infinite. Without limitation, one can express oneself in any way without limitation.
Does it-
So this cup could grow lips and start giving teachings instead of me.
It could drink itself.
It could drink itself, it could, yeah, whatever.
That thing confused me because there is a passage in the Swami Lakshmanju book where he says, God, Shiva can become a stone, and a stone is just a stone.
Mhm.
It will never realize.
Mhm.
So that's where I
I
got
don't know.
confused.
I don't think that's true. Peace to Swami Lakshmanju. And one of the examples that's given in the Pratyabhijna texts for talking about Swatantriya is that some siddhas can make objects appear out of thin air, and we've read about this in Fourth Uncle in the Mountain. So if you can manifest, in fact, in one part of Fourth Uncle in the Mountain, someone manifests a cup of coffee. Like they're out in the wilderness and they want a cup of coffee, and they make one appear. If you can do that, surely God can make this cup give teachings.
There seems to be a formality to reality, though.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's I don't know. They're just that.
it's interesting to think about. Like, there are humans and there are cups, and like, I mean, you know, relatively speaking, right? So there's like some sort of formality to the way, like.
Well, there
yeah,
is a formality to our view of things.
Yeah,
You mean
So
like a
again,
orderliness, sort of?
I
A
guess.
continuity and a sort of some structure and rules. There's
Yeah,
gonna be
yeah.
rules, right? Yeah, I mean, I can't explain that thoroughly, but certainly a lot of that has to do with our karmic realm vision and our conviction that the things around us are solid and immalleable. Because again, referring to more accomplished yogis, they can walk through walls. They can do things that we would consider to be impossible if we're in boring mind.
I was thinking that.
Hey, Shambhavi?
Yeah,
I came in late, so I think maybe you guys talked about this, but is that sense of Pratyabhijna, that self-recognition, is it like something is constantly being revealed and there's like that moment where you realize what's been forgotten and that quality sort of permeates?
yes.
So there's no just like, I know myself and I got used to that and I'm not amazed by it anymore.
Well, let's have this example. And this is, if you've studied ever poetry in school, which most of us, at least, you know, in high school, they forced us to read a poem or something. My experience studying poetry is that, unless it's, you know, some really dumb poem, when you first read it, it's kind of impenetrable, right? You have to learn the particular language of that poet. And then once you do, what happens? You don't think, oh, I got it now, and now it's uninteresting because now I understand it. No, the poem gets better and better the more you read it and the more you delve into the language of that poet. And it kind of just keeps unfolding infinitely, and you appreciate it more and enjoy it more for having had it been revealed to you. So we're going from a condition where our senses are relatively shut down, our minds are relatively shut down, and our understanding is very limited, to a circumstance where our senses open and our mind opens, and we have greater understanding and we can enjoy more. We enjoy more. Okay, so that's what I'm going to say about Pratyabhijna. Any other questions about it or comments before we move on?
I was gonna say, for that cup being so like inert and devoid of self-realization, it participates in teaching us so often.
Yeah.
You know? It kind of is participating and teaching us our real nature. So.
It's true. It's what's ready to hand, right? Just use what we have right there. We don't have to reach too far because our real nature is very close to us. All right, let's have a short bathroom break, and then we'll start talking about Abhinavagupta's 15 verses.
It's just whenever I have temperature difference, like I'm wearing too many layers and then it comes up and makes me do that. What kind of thing?
So you're so in the way.
I think it's funny that I take pictures of Suri when she's wrong now. I can make a
little album.
Yeah. I asked her what's the temperature for chicken, and it actually gave me the temperature for chicken Alaska. Or what's AK? Alaska?
These are weird calories.
It's a tricky question.
Or maybe I know some of it now, but yeah. She doesn't.
I know I did, and then I asked about roast chicken, and then I figured it out.
Right, because now you have more cues.
I'm trying to use it just to experience how it gets better, or how to ask a question. It has gotten better.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, like
And
predilection.
2 weeks is pretty average for
Is
getting
that
the hearing stuff
Yeah.
pretty bad.
I have to put a stop on it.
That's what I thought. I don't see them as a field. Probably work.
You sound pretty like you usually do.
It's fun to think about.
That's what I hear. And her had the violence volume, but pretty similar. Like, oh, she'll be fine.
Well, it's very brief.
Kyle left.
I almost didn't watch it.
Yeah,
That was because I had lots of
I mean, I had a drink with her last night.
Oh, did you good?
That's just
Yeah, those are my favorite people. Go out.
all the characters were real.
Yeah, Justin.
Yeah. Well, they're just, I almost didn't watch it too because of that, but it's just set in the town and people are every bit.
Yeah.
That's a real town. Oh, you're not, yes,
Yeah, well, and they're fantastic workers, so
In
it's nice to have them
Saskatoon,
spot.
but,
Talks more training. Yeah, I never actually thought about that, but yeah.
I don't know, I'm not sold.
You're not sold?
No.
I'm sorry.
Oh, you just been live.
Wait, how are you?
I'm seeing now. I've been poking around. I'm not supposed to drive too much, but I've been out and, I don't want to go home. Right,
If he gave us.
well, sort of, but yeah, I'll tell you why I don't do it. My nails are growing back. That time is so hard on heels. But I just said, I really love it. I really love it. Three-quarters of the way through the, I got a new PC. But I really, like the co-op a lot. Yeah. Kevin? Steve? Yeah. That's nice of him to say that. Yeah.
Yeah, really.
Yeah. He is. He is.
You need a tier 1?
I don't think so. Someday we'll replace it with men and women's bathrooms.
Oh, so there isn't a line.
Well, there's more bathrooms.
It's more stalls.
And it's just kooky.
How many years have we been here already?
Yeah.
So 2 more years in the lease?
Oh yeah, it's 2020 when it ends.
I mean, we can get out of this.
Yeah.
But then we'll have our farmhouse
Farmhouse in Portland.
in the city.
Still in the city limits. And one pocket in Portland.
Yes.
curious to see what happens as a result of the website. We do.
So we have more traffic.
We just look more official.
Even our other site looks good. It's always looks clean and professional versus other sites. That
Yeah, true. Our other site was sort of falling apart though at the end. Pictures were disappearing and it was sort of like a salmon swimming upstream. Pieces of it were dropping off. It had some database corruption and I didn't know why weird things were going wrong, but I guess that's good.
That happens.
Yeah.
Then as you bolt
Just
things
been
on.
fiddled with for too long.
Yeah. That happens to software.
I wonder if they have always, which is what they want to do. Like what?
Is there still somebody in the bathroom?
I'll be good.
Okay. You want to put your hand these out? Glasses is gonna have your mouth. There shouldn't be 2 pages. It should have been, it was supposed to be printed back to back, wasn't it?
It wasn't. It's 2 pages.
2 pages.
I hope there's enough copies, because
Oh, if there's
They're
not, I
very
can
thick.
give mine to someone because I have one at home.
weird.
Also, there are 16.
Blanket.
Yeah,
There are
There's
16.
no one here to say
Yep.
Oh,
that's
there
right. Abhinav Gupta
It looked like somebody
loves to play that way.
36
Plus one.
Yep, he was the inventor of the 37 tatva.
Like seriously.
Okay, the recording could stop at this point.
Okay.
He liked to play. He was a real trickster. Funny guy. Abhinav Gupta.